I gave her $52,000, every cent I had saved for my final years. She said her brother needed surgery, but her brother, he never existed, and I didn't find out until I had nothing left. I was sitting beside Jasmine on a humid evening in Cagayan de Oro when she turned to me and said those words I'd been craving to hear for 8 years. "You make me feel safe, Lawrence. Like I finally have someone who cares." Her head rested on my shoulder, and I could smell the faint scent of sampaguita in her hair. I remember thinking, this is it. This is what I've been missing. She squeezed my hand gently, her small fingers wrapping around mine, and I felt something in my chest unlock, something I thought had rusted shut after my divorce. "I mean it," she whispered. "You're different from other men." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her so badly. I'd met Jasmine 6 months earlier on one of those dating apps I'd sworn I'd never use. I was 60 years old, retired from logistics management, living alone in a quiet suburb outside Atlanta. My ex-wife had remarried. My friends were busy with their grandkids. I worked from home doing consulting work, and some days the only voice I heard was my own. Then Jasmine's message came through. It wasn't like the others. No immediate compliments about my profile picture. No requests for help with phone bills or family emergencies. She asked me about Atlanta, about what I did for work. She told me she was studying nursing in Cagayan de Oro, living with her aunt, trying to build a better future. She was 22, but she wrote like someone older, thoughtful, curious. We talked for weeks before she even sent me a photo. When she did, I stared at it for a long time. She was beautiful, yes, but it was her smile that got me. It looked real, not posed, not practiced, just real. "What made you message me?" I asked her once during a video call. She laughed softly, brushing hair behind her ear. "I don't know. You looked kind, like someone who's been through things but didn't let it make him mean." I didn't know what to say to that. No one had called me kind in years. The conversations became daily, then constant. She'd send me voice messages while walking to class. I'd call her during my lunch breaks. She never asked for money, never hinted at problems. She just talked to me, like I mattered. And slowly, without even realizing it, I started planning my days around hearing from her. 3 months in, I flew to the Philippines to meet her. I was terrified she wouldn't show up at the airport, that I'd been talking to someone who wasn't real. But there she was, standing near the arrival gate in a simple yellow dress, holding a small sign with my name written in careful handwriting. She ran to me, actually ran. And when she wrapped her arms around me, I felt 20 years younger. "You're really here," she said into my chest. "I'm really here," I repeated. We spent 5 days together. She showed me her city, introduced me to her aunt briefly, took me to local restaurants where I fumbled with chopsticks, and she laughed without making me feel stupid. On the last night, we sat by the water, and she rested her head on my shoulder. That's when she said it. "You make me feel safe, Lawrence." I kissed the top of her head. "You make me feel alive," I told her, and I meant it. When I flew back to Atlanta, I couldn't stop thinking about her. I started looking into retirement visas. I researched cost of living in Cagayan de Oro. I imagined a life where I wasn't alone anymore, where someone waited for me to come home. A week after I returned, she sent me a voice message late at night. Her voice was softer than usual, hesitant. "Lawrence, can I tell you something?" she asked. "Of course," I replied immediately. "I've been thinking about my family a lot lately, about my brother." I paused. She'd never mentioned a brother before. "You have a brother?" I asked carefully. "Yes, Kuya Ben. He's 26. He works construction and odd jobs to help my aunt with bills. He's a good person. He struggles." Her voice caught slightly, and I felt that protective instinct rise in my chest, the one that made me want to fix things. "To help. What's going on with him?" I asked. She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Nothing. I just miss him. He's been working so much lately we barely talk. She changed the subject after that, but something had shifted. She'd opened a door, and I'd stepped through it. Over the next few weeks, Ben became a presence in our conversations. Jasmine would mention him casually, how he'd worked a double shift, how he'd sent money to their aunt for groceries, how he never complained, but she could tell he was exhausted. He sounds like a good man, I told her once. He is, she said quietly. He deserves better, you know. He's been taking care of everyone since our parents passed. He never gets to take care of himself. I asked to see a photo. She hesitated, then pulled one up on her phone during a video call. The image was blurry, taken from a distance. A young man in a basketball jersey, face partially turned away, standing near what looked like a construction site. He's shy, she explained quickly. He hates having his picture taken. I squinted at the screen. He looks strong, healthy. He is, she said, but something in her tone felt off. Sad, but he's been having headaches lately, bad ones, and dizziness. I leaned forward. Has he seen a doctor? She shook her head. He won't go. Says he can't afford it, and you know how men are. They always think they're fine until they're not. I felt a tightness in my chest. I knew that feeling. Pride mixed with fear. The belief that if you ignored something long enough, it would go away. Maybe I could help, I said carefully. You know, if he needs to see someone. I could. No, she cut me off gently but firmly. No, Lawrence. That's not why I'm telling you this. I needed to talk to someone. You're the only person who listens to me. And just like that, she'd made me feel important again. Needed. Seen. I dropped the subject. But the seed had been planted, and she knew it. The next week, she mentioned Ben was still having headaches, that he'd nearly fallen off a scaffold at work, that her aunt was worried but didn't have money for a doctor's visit. I listened. I didn't offer. Not yet. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But I also didn't want to be that guy. The foreigner who throws money at problems to feel useful. I wanted to believe I was more than that to her. Then one night, she called me crying. It was 3 a.m. her time. I answered immediately, my heart hammering. Jasmine, what's wrong? She was sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. It's Ben. He collapsed at work today. They took him to the hospital. They ran tests. My stomach dropped. What did they find? A tumor, she whispered, in his brain. The doctors say he needs surgery. Soon. I sat up in bed, my mind racing. Okay, we'll figure this out. What hospital is he at? What do the doctors need? She took a shaky breath. They want to do more scans first, a biopsy. But Lawrence, we don't have the money. My aunt has nothing saved. I've been trying to help, but I'm just a student. And Ben, he has no insurance. Nothing. I heard myself ask the question before I could stop it. How much? She went quiet. Jasmine, how much do they need? $8,000, she said, her voice breaking. Just for the scans and biopsy. The surgery will be more. But if we don't do the scans, they won't know how bad it is. They won't know if they can even operate. $8,000. I had it. In my retirement savings account. Money I'd been setting aside for emergencies. For medical bills down the road. For funeral expenses. But what was more of an emergency than this? A 26-year-old man with a brain tumor? I'll send it, I said. Lawrence, no, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. Give me the hospital information. I'll wire it first thing in the morning. She cried harder. Thank you. Oh my God, Lawrence, thank you. You're saving his life. You're saving my brother's life. I sat there in the dark, phone pressed to my ear, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose. I wasn't just some lonely old man anymore. I was someone who mattered, someone who could make a difference. I wired $8,500 the next morning. She sent me a photo an hour later, a hospital hallway, fluorescent lights, a partial view of a receipt with Filipino text and a hospital logo I didn't recognize. Then a voice message. Lawrence, I don't know how to thank you. The doctors are running the tests now. Ben doesn't know you're helping. I didn't want to tell him until I was sure. But I'm telling you, you saved his life today. I played that message 3 times. Her gratitude felt real, raw. I told myself this was the right thing to do. That money was just money. That I could make it back doing consulting work. That what mattered was helping someone I cared about. I waited for updates. She sent them sporadically. Ben was stable. The tests were done. They were waiting for results. Then a few days later, another call. The doctors have the results, she said. Her voice was tight, controlled. They can operate. But Lawrence, there's a problem. My chest constricted. What kind of problem? The hospital needs a deposit. For the operating room. For the surgical team. They won't schedule it without payment up front. I closed my eyes. How much? $12,000. $12,000. On top of the $8,500. That was over $20,000 total. More than a quarter of my retirement savings. I felt something twist in my gut. Not quite doubt. Not yet. Just heaviness. Can I see the documents? I asked. The hospital paperwork? There was a pause. Then, of course, I'll scan everything and send it to you. She sent me a PDF an hour later. It was mostly in Tagalog, some English mixed in, a hospital logo at the top, numbers, medical terms I didn't understand. I Googled the hospital name. It existed. It was real. That made me feel better. A little. I need a couple days, I told her, to move money around. Of course, she said softly. I understand. I'm just grateful you're even considering it. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the numbers, the timing, the way everything seemed urgent but never quite urgent enough for her to pressure me. I picked up my phone and texted my friend Rick back in Atlanta. We'd known each other since college. He was the only person I'd told about Jasmine. His response came fast. Man, you sure this is real? I stared at his message for a long time. Then I typed back, the hospital exists. I checked. He replied, that's not what I asked. I didn't answer him. The next morning, I wired $12,000. Jasmine's thank you message was shorter this time. You're an angel, Lawrence. Ben's surgery is scheduled for next week. I waited for details, for a date, a time. She said she'd send them. She didn't. Days went by. I asked about Ben. He's preparing for surgery, she said. Resting. Nervous. Then the day before the supposed surgery, she called. I knew before she even spoke. I could hear it in her breathing. There's a complication, she said. What kind of complication? I asked, my voice flat. The doctors did another scan. They need to change the approach. It's more extensive than they thought. They're saying they need another deposit for post-op care, for medications, for the extended stay. I felt something crack inside me. Not break, just crack. How much, Jasmine? She hesitated. 6,000. 6,000. 26,500 total. More than half my retirement savings. Gone. I can't keep doing this, I said quietly. She started crying. I know, Lawrence. I'm so sorry. I didn't know it would be like this. If there was any other way, I would do it. But he's my brother. He's all I have left of my family. If he dies because we couldn't afford it, I'll never forgive myself. And there it was, the guilt, the emotional weight shifting from her shoulders to mine. If I said no, I was the man who let her brother die. If I said yes, I was the man who gave everything to help someone I'd never even met. I sent the $6,000. I didn't tell Rick. I didn't tell anyone. I just sat in my apartment, staring at my bank account balance, and wondered when I'd become this person. Someone who gave away his future for a woman he'd spent 5 days with in person. Jasmine sent me a voice message that night. The surgery is tomorrow morning. I'll update you as soon as I can. Thank you, Lawrence. For everything. I love you. It was the first time she'd said those words. I should have felt happy, Instead, I felt hollow. The next day, I waited for updates. Nothing. I texted her. "How's Ben?" She didn't respond for 6 hours. When she finally did, it was brief. "Surgery went well. He's in recovery. Very weak. I'll call you tomorrow." Tomorrow came. No call. I messaged her. "Can I talk to him? Just to hear his voice?" She replied, "Doctor says no visitors yet. He needs rest. I'll ask when I can." Another week passed. I barely heard from her. When I did, she was distant, tired, stressed about Ben, she said. Then another call came. "Lawrence, I hate to ask, but the hospital is saying he needs another week of observation. They're worried about infection, and the medications are so expensive. I've been trying to cover it, but I can't." My hands started shaking. "How much?" $6,000, $32,000 total. My retirement was disappearing. I could see it draining away like water through my fingers. "Jasmine, I need to talk to the hospital," I said, my voice harder than I intended. "I need to speak to a doctor. I need to verify this." Silence. Then, "You don't trust me?" "It's not that. It's just, this is a lot of money. I need to understand what's happening. I need documentation, contact information." "I'll get it for you," she said coldly. "I'll send everything." She didn't. I waited 3 days. Nothing. I found the hospital number online and called myself. A woman answered in Tagalog. I asked for the billing department in broken English. She transferred me. Another woman answered. I explained I was inquiring about a patient. Ben. I didn't have his last name. I realized with a sinking feeling I'd never asked. The woman said something I didn't understand. I asked again in simpler English. She paused, then said slowly, "No patient. That name. No patient here." My world tilted. "Are you sure? He had brain surgery last week, tumor removal." "No patient," she repeated. "Sorry." I hung up. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold the phone. I called Jasmine immediately. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I texted her. "The hospital says there's no patient named Ben. Explain." She didn't respond for 8 hours. When she finally did, it was a short message. "They made a mistake. Different department. I'll send you proof." She never did. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning through every conversation, every voice message, every photo she'd sent me, the blurry picture of Ben, the hospital documents in Tagalog, the receipts that showed just enough to seem real but never enough to verify. I thought about how she'd always had another need, another emergency, another reason I needed to send money, but I'd never spoken to Ben, never video called him, never heard his voice. I'd sent $32,000 to help a man I'd never met based on the word of a woman I'd spent 5 days with. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd been played, but I didn't want to believe it. Not yet. Not completely. I needed to see for myself. I needed proof, so I did something I probably should have done months earlier. I booked a flight back to Cagayan de Oro. I didn't tell Jasmine I was coming. I just went. When I landed, the familiar heat hit me as I stepped off the plane, but this time it didn't feel welcoming. It felt suffocating. I checked into a small hotel near the city center, not the nice place I'd stayed at before. Somewhere cheaper. My bank account was screaming at me. I had maybe $18,000 left, not enough to retire on, not enough for an emergency, nothing. The next morning, I took a taxi to the address Jasmine had once mentioned was her aunt's house, Tita Carmina's place, a small concrete home with a rusted gate and laundry hanging outside. I stood at the gate for a full minute before I knocked. No answer. I knocked again. Still nothing. I was about to leave when an older man walking past stopped and looked at me. "You looking for someone?" he asked in accented English. "Yes," I said. "The family who lives here, Carmina, and her niece, Jasmine." The man's face changed. Something guarded slipped over his expression. Carmina moved last year, I don't know where. And Jasmine? He hesitated. Then he asked, You American? I nodded. He sighed, shook his head slightly, and said, Come, sit. He gestured to a plastic chair outside his house next door. I followed. We sat. He introduced himself as Mang Ernie. He'd lived on this street for 30 years. You here because of Jasmine? He asked. I nodded. He looked at me with something close to pity. You gave her money. It wasn't a question. Yes, I admitted. For her brother, Ben. He needed surgery. Mang Ernie's face hardened. She doesn't have a brother, sir. The air left my lungs. What? No brother. Never did. I know her family. Grew up watching her. No brother. I couldn't speak. Couldn't process, Mang Ernie continued. She has a boyfriend. Lives with him. Construction worker. Nice enough guy. Doesn't know what she does online, I think. Or maybe he does. I don't know their business. Each word was a knife. Where? I managed to ask. Where does she live? He looked uncomfortable. Sir, maybe it's better if you, please, I interrupted. I need to see. He studied me for a long moment. Then he pointed down the street. 2 blocks, blue apartment building, 3rd floor, Unit 7. I stood. Thank you. Sir, he called after me. I turned. Be careful. These things, they don't end well. I walked the 2 blocks in a daze. My heart was hammering. My hands were cold despite the heat. I found the building, climbed the stairs, stood outside Unit 7. I didn't knock. I couldn't. I just stood there like a coward, staring at the door, and then it opened. A young man stepped out. Mid-20s, muscular, wearing a basketball jersey. The same face from the photo. The same person Jasmine had called her brother. He didn't see me. He was laughing, turning back towards someone inside. Jasmine, you want anything from the store? He called. My stomach dropped, and then she appeared. Jasmine, my Jasmine, wearing shorts and an oversized shirt, her hair up in a messy bun. She laughed at something he said and kissed him on the cheek. Just water and those chips I like. He kissed her back, on the mouth this time. Then he turned and started walking toward the stairs, toward me. I stepped back into the shadows. He passed me without a glance. Jasmine was still standing in the doorway, looking at her phone, smiling. She looked happy, relaxed, nothing like the stressed, desperate woman who'd been calling me crying about her dying brother. She looked like someone who'd never had a problem in her life. I turned and walked down the stairs. I didn't confront her. I didn't knock on the door. I didn't scream or demand answers. I just left. What was the point? She'd tell me I was wrong. That I misunderstood. That the guy was her cousin or her friend. She'd lie until I wanted to believe her again. And part of me, the pathetic part, might have. I went back to my hotel room and sat on the bed. I pulled out my phone and opened my conversation with Jasmine. I stared at the messages. Hundreds of them. Voice notes, photos, promises. I started typing. I know about Ben. I know he doesn't exist. I know about your boyfriend. I saw you today. I saw everything. My thumb hovered over the send button. Then I deleted it, word by word, until the message box was empty. What would sending it accomplish? She'd deny it, block me, laugh with her boyfriend about the stupid American who sent her $52,000, or maybe she'd apologize. Maybe she'd say she was desperate, that she needed the money for her family, that she never meant to hurt me. And you know what? Maybe that was even true. Maybe she did need the money. Maybe her life was harder than I could imagine. Maybe scamming lonely foreign men was the only way she knew how to survive. But that didn't change what she'd done. That didn't change what I'd lost. I thought about the $32,000 I'd wired, the additional $20,000 I'd taken out as a personal loan at 9% interest, $52,000 total. $52,000 that I'd never see again. Money I'd saved over decades. Money I'd planned to live on when I couldn't work anymore. Money I'd set aside for medical emergencies or a decent funeral so I wouldn't die alone and broke. All of it gone. Given away to a woman who'd told me I made her feel safe while she was living with another man. I looked at her profile picture on my phone. That smile. That genuine-looking, warm smile. And I finally understood. It wasn't that she was a good liar. It was that I was desperate to believe. I wanted so badly to be needed, to be important to someone, to matter, that I'd ignored every red flag, every inconsistency, every moment my gut told me something was wrong, because admitting I was being used meant admitting I was alone again, and I couldn't handle that. So I'd chosen the lie. I'd chosen to believe in the brother who never existed, in the hospital documents I couldn't read, in the love of a 22-year-old woman for a 60-year-old man she barely knew. I'd chosen fantasy over truth because fantasy felt better, until it didn't. I booked a flight home that night. I didn't say goodbye to Jasmine. I didn't send a final message. I just left. On the plane, I sat by the window and watched the Philippines disappear below me. I thought about Mang Ernie's words. These things don't end well. He was right. This didn't end well. But it ended, and maybe that was enough. When I got back to Atlanta, I didn't tell anyone what happened. Not Rick, not my ex-wife, not the one cousin I still talked to at Christmas. I just came home to my empty apartment, put my suitcase in the closet, and sat on my couch. My phone buzzed. A message from Jasmine. "Lawrence, I miss you. When are you coming back to visit?" I stared at it for a long time. She didn't know I'd been there. Didn't know I'd seen her with him. Didn't know that I knew. She probably thought I'd send more money eventually, that I'd believe whatever story she told next. Maybe I would have, if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. I blocked her number, deleted the app we'd met on, deleted every photo, every voice message, every reminder that she'd existed. Then I looked at my bank account. $18,000. I was 60 years old with $18,000 to my name. The next few months were brutal. I sold my car and started using public transit. I picked up more consulting work, taking projects I would have turned down before because they paid poorly. I moved out of my apartment and into a cheaper place on the other side of town, 1 bedroom. No washer and dryer, a window that overlooked a parking lot. I ate simply. Rice, beans, eggs, instant coffee instead of the good stuff. I paid $500 a month toward the personal loan. At this rate, it would take me 3 years to pay it off. 3 years at 9% interest. I'd end up paying back almost $26,000 on a $20,000 loan. Money I'd spent on a fictional brain tumor. One day I was scrolling online, just wasting time, and I saw Jasmine's profile was still active on the dating app. Same photos, same bio, same warm smile. I wondered how many other men she was talking to. How many were sending her money? How many believed in brothers and surgeries and emergencies that didn't exist? I wondered if her boyfriend knew, if he was part of it, or if he was just another person she'd lied to. It didn't matter anymore. I didn't feel angry. I'd expected to. I'd expected rage and bitterness. But mostly I just felt sad. Sad that I'd been so lonely I'd believed an obvious lie. Sad that she'd been so desperate she'd built her life around scamming people. Sad that this was what human connection had become for both of us. Transactions, stories, performances, nothing real. I thought about reporting her. To the app, to the authorities. But what would I say? That I voluntarily sent money to someone I met online? That I wired thousands of dollars without verifying anything? They'd look at me like I was an idiot. Because I was. There was no crime here, just stupidity, just loneliness weaponized. A few months later, Rick called me. We hadn't talked in a while. "Hey man, how's the Philippines girl?" he asked. "Didn't work out," I said. "Sorry to hear that. You doing okay?" "Yeah," I lied. "I'm fine." We talked for a few more minutes, but I could tell he knew something was wrong. He didn't push. I appreciated that. After we hung up, I sat on my balcony. It was a small concrete slab, barely big enough for a plastic chair, but it was mine. I watched the sunset over the parking lot. The sky turned orange, then pink, then purple. It was beautiful, and I was alone watching it, but I was still here, broke, humiliated, but still here. I've had a lot of time to think about what happened, about what I'd tell someone if they asked me for advice. First, I'd tell them that loneliness is a dangerous thing. It makes you see what you want to see. It makes you believe in people who don't exist and futures that will never happen. When you're starving for connection, anything that looks like food becomes a feast, even if it's poison. Second, I'd tell them to look at actions, not words. Jasmine told me she loved me, told me I made her feel safe, told me I was different from other men, but her actions said something else. She never let me meet her family, never let me visit her brother, never showed me real proof of anything. She kept me at arm's length while reaching into my wallet. Words are easy. Actions tell the truth. Third, I'd tell them that helping someone shouldn't make you poor. Real love doesn't drain you dry. Real need doesn't come with constant emergencies and urgent deadlines. If someone you care about is always in crisis, always needing more, always one payment away from disaster, something is wrong, either with their situation or with their honesty. And it's okay to step back. It's okay to say no. It's okay to protect yourself. But here's the thing I've realized. I don't entirely blame Jasmine. I do. She lied. She manipulated. She saw my loneliness and exploited it. That's on her. But I also made choices. I ignored red flags because I wanted to. I sent money I couldn't afford to lose because it made me feel important. I chose fantasy over reality because reality was too painful. That's on me. I wanted to be someone's hero, someone's savior. I wanted to matter in a way I hadn't mattered in years. And I was willing to pay for that feeling. $52,000, apparently. That's what mattering cost me. Was it worth it? No. God, no. But did I learn something? Yes. I learned that I can't buy connection. I can't purchase love or meaning or purpose. Those things have to be built slowly, honestly, with people who see me as more than a wallet. I learned that being alone is better than being used, that silence is better than lies, that my own company, as lonely as it is more valuable than fake intimacy. I learned that I'm stronger than I thought. Because I survived this, I lost almost everything, and I'm still here, still getting up in the morning, still working, still living. I'm 60 years old. I'm broke. I'm alone. I'm living in a one-bedroom apartment with a view of a parking lot, eating rice and eggs, taking the bus to work. This isn't how I thought my life would look at this age, but it's my life, and I'm still living it. Sometimes I wonder what Jasmine is doing now, if she thinks about me, if she feels guilty, if she tells herself stories to justify what she did, if she's found other men to help her through fictional emergencies. I wonder if her boyfriend ever found out, if her aunt knew the whole time, if there was ever any truth in anything she told me. But mostly, I don't think about her at all anymore, because she's not worth my thoughts. She took my money. She took my trust. She took my hope. But she didn't take everything. I'm still here, and that's worth something. If I could go back and talk to myself 6 months before I met Jasmine, I'd say this: your loneliness is real. Your need for connection is valid. But don't let those things make you stupid. Don't let them blind you. Don't give away your future for a present that doesn't exist. Love yourself enough to ask questions, to demand proof, to walk away when things don't add up. Love yourself enough to be alone if that's what it takes to stay safe. Because being alone isn't the worst thing. Being used is. Being lied to is. Being left with nothing is. I sit on my balcony most evenings now. I watch the sunset. I drink cheap instant coffee. I think about my life and the choices that led me here, and I try to forgive myself for being lonely, for being desperate, for believing in something that was never real. Some days I succeed. Some days I don't. But I keep trying. I'm 60 years old. I'm broke. I'm alone. But I'm still here. Still breathing. Still learning. Still growing. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that has to be enough. Because it's all I have left. The sun sets. The sky turns dark. The parking lot empties. And I'm still here. Broken, but still here.